Hello everyone, it's PokePhenomenal, and we're back today with another tier list video. Now, this video might be a bit on the long side, depending, because we are going to be doing a ranking of every single encounter in Fire Red and Leaf Green in the context of a Nuzlocke. Now, Andrew and I have wanted to do this video for a while now, just because, as I'm sure you know, we love Fire Red and Leaf Green, and we love the Kanto Pokemon, and we thought it would be fun to kind of talk about, you know, how each Pokemon stacks up against each other in terms of like their overall usefulness in a Fire and Leaf Green Nuzlocke. And, you know, for context, we haven't done like a ton of research beforehand. We each made our own individual rankings just to kind of get an idea of like where we think, you know, each Pokemon falls. And the goal with this video is to kind of make like a definitive tier list on the encounters. For a way of background, I guess we're going to be ranking the evolutionary line of each Pokemon, so we're not doing like the individual Pokemon, just because like we thought it would be better to kind of talk about the line as a whole in terms of like how useful it is, you know, throughout an entire Nuzlocke versus just, you know, how good is the Pokemon on like your Elite Four team. So we're going to be talking about like each evolutionary line. We're not going to be talking about the legendaries just because, you know, we don't use them. And we don't personally use like gift Pokemon, but we will be ranking them just because some people do use them, and I think we have enough knowledge to rank them, so they will be included. The kind of scope of our analysis is, you know, we're doing a pretty comprehensive overview. The things like we considered are like the Pokemon's typing, its stats, abilities, its moveset, its rarity versus if it's a common encounter, where and when in the run you can encounter the Pokemon, and just like its overall, you know, usefulness in the context of a Fire and Leaf Green Nuzlocke. And with all that said, I guess let's get started.
So I think Mike did a pretty good job of just going over in general what our plan is for this tier list, what our goal is in making it. But I want to just reiterate the disclaimer that this is obviously our subjective tier list, so it's going to be kind of a confluence of our opinions on the encounters in the game. But because everything is coming from our own experience and our own opinion, and neither of us did an incredible amount of like outside research on stat blocks and all of these different things to make our lists, I'm sure there's going to be some slip-ups here and there, so hopefully you can forgive those, kind of look at the broader point that we're trying to make of this is what we think, this is where we think each Pokemon or each evolutionary line stands in a hardcore Fire Red and Leaf Green Nuzlocke, because that's probably a topic that we have more knowledge on than most people, so like even without all the research, I think we at least have something to say.
Okay, so first up we have the Bulbasaur line. I had this line ranked as an S.
Yeah, I ranked Bulbasaur's line as an S too.
The Bulbasaur line is probably, it's the best like grass type encounter in the Kanto region, and it's just a, you know, it's a very good starter for the early game. Like, it's the best starter for Misty. It's good against, you know, Brock, Misty, even Surge. It's useful and just has a lot of utility. The Bulbasaur line gets a lot of good like support and status type moves like Leech Seed and Sleep Powder, Poison Powder, you know, even Synthesis later on. It's a very useful Pokemon, and you know, it's a starter, so it has pretty good stats. So it's just a solid encounter throughout the entirety of the game. Definitely the best starter, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think like in a Nuzlocke context, I think for sure Bulbasaur's line is just like the best that you can get. Like, Blastoise is really, really good, Charizard is really, really good, but you're gonna get a lot of other water types in the game, and like Charizard, you don't need a fire type for most of the game. So like, but with Bulbasaur, like, you almost need a good grass type early on, and Bulbasaur is just so good. And I think like it balances really well, and like Bulbasaur is really, really, really good in the early game, and then Venusaur is really solid in the late game. So like, it's good for the entire game. There's never a point where you like can't find a reason to put it on your team. Venusaur is pretty bulky, so I think like it has a good longevity when your enemies are getting stronger. Like, Venusaur can come in. Venusaur is weirdly fast, so he can come in and do like weird sweeping strategies with like setting up a Leech Seed, Sleep Powder, Giga Drain, like whatever you need. So yeah, I mean, it's solid throughout the whole game. It's a type that you need. It's the best representative of its type in the game. I think it's a pretty solid S tier.
Yep, I'd agree.
Okay, so if we move on to the Charmander line. Personally, I have Charmander and that whole line set at an A.
So do I.
And in terms of why, like, obviously I think the early game, kind of the weakness of this line in the early game is a detriment. Like, it's a pretty tough time with the Charmander at the beginning. Sometimes having the Charmander can be like one of the primary factors that leads to you wiping early in the game. So even if it gets a little stronger in the mid to late game, like, that early game detriment is really prevalent. It's like really noticeable when you're playing a Nuzlocke. So like, and even when it gets stronger, like its mid to late game it's strong because the fire type is good. The combination of the fire flying is a really good type combination. It has a ton of use and like it can find a place on an Elite Four team easily, but it's nothing like a Venusaur where it's just like good throughout the entire game. Like it's more situational, but it does have a lot of utility for different fights, and it gets Dragon Claw. I think that like on its own pushes it up. So for me, it's just kind of like, it's not good enough to be S, but like you're going to be able to use it throughout the whole game if you have it, as long as it doesn't die early on. So I think that it fits pretty well into A.
Yeah, like I think it's a good starter, but it just doesn't have the consistency that the Bulbasaur line does. Charmander isn't great against Brock. It's the worst against Misty, so you will struggle in the early game. It's good against Erica, but even by that point, you should have multiple encounters to deal with her. It's a solid starter. I think its probably best advantage is it has a pretty good like move pool. Like you can teach it fly, you can give it like a brick break, a dragon claw like you said. It's like it can have some decent coverage, but I just think it doesn't have the potential that the Bulbasaur line has. So I think it's below it.
Yeah, it's a pretty high A tier in my opinion.
Okay, so next we have the Squirtle line. I had this as an A encounter, a high A.
Yeah, I had it as a high A too, and like putting it in reference to Charizard's line, I had it like almost the same, maybe I'm not sure, maybe slightly weaker in A, but yeah, I had it in A.
I had it above the Charizard line by quite a bit in mine.
I think the reason that I have it slightly below is purely because of like in reference to the million water type encounters you can get, whereas Charizard is filling a niche that you don't have a lot of other options for. But that was kind of my perspective on it, just putting it below. Like with a Blastoise, at a certain point you're going to be catching other water types that are better, and you might even think like, should I take the Blastoise off? Whereas a Charizard, you're never really replacing a Charizard with a different fire type. But I'm open to discussion on that, but that was my thinking.
Yeah, no, I get that, because, yeah, water types are the most common encounters in Nuzlocke, so there are definitely more water encounters you'll get than fire encounters. So, yeah, I think the Charizard line is more valuable than the Blastoise line in that aspect, but I just think, like, overall, it's just a really good Pokemon. Like, in the early game, water is good, and, it is the best water type you'll have access to for part of the early game. And, even into the late game, Blastoise is all, like, you can sweep Blaine and Giovanni with any water type, but you could do it with your starter. It can be decent, like, in the Elite Four, like, give it an Ice Beam, and, like, it can handle Lance. So I just think, like, it's just a really solid water type. There are a lot of water types in this game, and there are a lot of good ones, but I think Blastoise is also really good.
Yeah, I think I was looking at it more from the encounter perspective of, like, if we kind of count the starter pick as one encounter. So for reference, when Mike and I play, we randomize our starter as well. Not everybody does that, but, like, it technically is a randomized encounter for us, too. And if you're looking at it among the three, for me, Squirtle has the least long-term unique value out of the three, because by my end game, I'm probably gonna like have a Gyarados and a Starmie that I would rather have on the team, and like not have the Blastoise there too. And even in the mid game, the War Turtle Blastoise kind of falls off a bit because you're not getting a lot of use on Surge, you're not getting a lot of use on Erica. So like, I think that those two things combined, like as an encounter, I still personally, it's ranking a little bit below the Charmander line for me because its utility is a little more constricted. Like it's broadly good because it's a water type, but from that encounter set of those three starters, I feel like you get the least unique utility out of the Squirtle line. It's still really good, but that's That's kind of my opinion on it.
No, I agree. I think that makes sense where, yeah, out of the 3 starters, you know, the Bulbasaur line is the best grass type, the Charizard line is the best fire type, but Blastoise isn't necessarily the best water type in the game, so like I can understand that.
Yeah, it's an A tier regardless, but if we're trying to look at it from an encounter perspective, for me, it just is, if I get the Charmander, there is the fear of the early game. It's like, oh no, what am I going to do? But once you clear that hurdle, there's a lot more of like, okay, I've got my solid fire type. Whereas with Squirtle, there's no fear at the beginning, but then later on I start to think, okay, I caught a Magikarp, I'm catching a Staryu, like, what's the point of the Blastoise? But yeah, definitely A. So moving on to Caterpie's line. This one I have set at actually a high B.
Yeah, I had mine in B, kind of like mid.
And for me, reasoning that I have it at high B is mostly because I'm looking at it like, you know, I think the big thing is that you catch a Caterpie, it's a really easy encounter to get, and you can immediately get the Butterfree. So like really this is just Butterfree. Like you're not spending a lot of time with Caterpie or Metapod. But then Butterfree becomes immediately useful to help against Brock. It can switch in on Misty to tank a hit or two if you really need to. It's not useful against Surge, so it has that against it. But like it's pretty useful early game, especially very early game. But it's like it's usable throughout the entire run because of Compound Eyes, Sleep Powder. It's decent as a Psychic user if you don't have something else to use Psychic on. Its moveset's not bad, and it gets kind of a decent enough move spread that you can use it for a bunch of different situations. And then yeah, like Compound Eye Sleep Powder is just really, really powerful. So the fact that it's usable throughout the entire game, and sometimes you'll be bringing it back onto your team, and also just like Compound Eye Sleep Powder, I think another thing that it adds is that it's really helpful for getting other encounters in the game. It's like as a Nuzlocke encounter, it's nice because it's like, okay, there's my Sleep Powder. That's going to help me a lot. I think Butterfree is really useful to like, Butterfree is a support Pokemon for like helping other strategies work by putting a Pokemon to sleep and switching out, or like helping you to get other encounters that might be dangerous to get otherwise. Like it's really useful. It's just a really useful encounter, which is why I had it at the higher end of B.
Yeah, I don't have much more to add to that. I think, like you said, it's a very solid encounter for the early game, but it's useful, you know, throughout the entire run. Basically, obviously other encounters can eclipse it, but it can always have a place on your team, almost to like round it out or like serve as like a backup where, yeah, if you don't have, like say a grass type, it can provide that utility with, you know, Sleep and Poison Powder. If you don't have a Psychic type, it can use Confusion and Psych. It's always solid. It's always nice to have, especially if you don't have anything like that's useful at the moment. Like the Butterfree is always there for you.
If no one got me, I know Butterfree got me.
Amen. So yeah, I think it's definitely like a B tier. Like it's good. All right. So next up we have the Weedle line. And it's just worse than
yeah, we just talked about Butterfree, so that kind of makes it stand out.
You know, the only nice thing is that, you know, you can get it early and you can get the Beedrill early, but it's just not providing a lot of value. It doesn't have the support utility that Butterfree has. It doesn't have that great of a move set. Like Twin Needle is like its best move. Like it's not really that useful for Brock. It's, you know, it can be useful for Misty, I guess. Like you could use on the Starmie.
So it's not like a horrible encounter to the point that you're not using it. It's just it is not as good as Butterfree.
Yeah, by like the mid game, Beedrill's just not really cutting it.
I will say though, like in the mid game, there is like if you've got the Beedrill, you're probably just like putting it on the team for Sabrina just in case. Like he might like make an appearance, but I mean that's a far cry from being like a staple of your team. Like to have that one situational use. So like I had him set as a C tier, like an easy C tier. Like he's all right when you don't have any other options, but anytime you have an option, the Beedrill is the first to go.
Yeah, I also had it in C. It's not really providing a lot.
Okay, next up is Pidgey. The Pidgey line. I actually also had this one in C, just like high C, like top of C. And that might be a hot take, I'm not sure. But my reasoning is that the Pidgey line is like a really classic example of like, I don't think it has any really great strengths. Like it's not like, there's no one thing outside of it's just, oh, well, it's a flying type and it's a 3-stager. Outside of that, it's like there's no like really like glaring strength. I mean, there's no glaring weakness either. It's the thing. It's just such a moderate Pokemon. And when you're looking at the early game, it already becomes outclassed early on by Spearow. Like it's outclassed like immediately by Spearow. So like it has a direct comparative like comparison point with Spearow. And it's a little bit less usable in the early game than Fearow. And then once you get like to a later point in the game, you know, like I feel like there's a fall off, because as soon as you get psychic types that you can use, like after like around Surge and after that, as soon as you're using psychic types on your team to like fight against fighting types with, the flying type just I feel like becomes worse as a whole. And then especially like the Pidgey is just like less useful, because like if there's a fighting type, you're probably going to be sending out a psychic type, and then those psychic types can also hit most of the grass types in the game that you're fighting for super effective damage. And then they can also actually fight against rock types without having to worry. So like fighting, it's interesting, like the psychic type makes the flying type worse, I think, in this game. And I think Pidgey gets hit especially hard by that, because it has a worse move pool than Fearow before fly, like pre-fly. So like, I don't know, it just like feels like a C for me. Like it's good and you can always use it, and it's a strong 3-stage Pokemon. But like there's a lot of points where I'm chucking this for a different Pokemon, because like Dodrio's better too. There are a lot of better flying types, and then there are even options that are better than the flying type.
Yeah, like I had the Pidgeyline, like low B. I think I agree that it's, you know, out of like the normal flying types, it is the worst one in terms of stats. But I think, you know, it has a few things going for, like, it's definitely the most common of like the flying type encounters, so like you have a chance to have a flying type if you need it. And you know, it has like some utility with like, you know, sand attack could be useful. You know, even like a cheeky whirlwind maybe could help in some situations. Like, you know, there are some things going for it.
That's true. Like the Spearow's not guaranteed, but a Pidgey is near guaranteed early on. And like the Doduo is also pretty much guaranteed, but that's so much later. It's like you're not getting the early game use out of it.
Yeah, and like, yeah, I mean the Pidgeyline's definitely best in the early game when you're fighting a lot of the bug trainers.
Right, I mean that's where it shines.
Yeah, so I just think, yeah, the fact that it's the most abundant kind of bumps it a little bit above C.
That's fair. I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to putting it at low B. Like for me, it felt like a high C, but like B, I mean, you know, it's got some stuff going for it. I'm okay with that.
Okay, so next up we have their Raticate line, and I had this in high B.
What a coincidence. So did I.
Yeah, like it's
good.
It's just a solid encounter.
It's definitely it's like really good. It's just like your Route 1 encounter, you get the Rattata and like you can breathe a little easier. Like it's good. Specifically, I wanted to talk about like early game. Like its move pool is so good in the early game. The quick attack, like Hyper Fang, and like stab, like a stab Hyper Fang early on as its second stage evolution. It's just like so good. We've talked a million times about like, oh, the Nugget Bridge rival fight. Don't worry, I've got Raticate. Like he can't do anything to me. So like, you know, good early game. I think the early game in the move pool is just really strong, and so Rattata is a great encounter early on. Plus, like, you know, it's a common encounter, and it's an encounter you can get later. Like if your Rattata dies, you can get like another one in Cinnabar Mansion later and just replace your Rattata if you still need one. Like get another Raticate. Its stats are good. Like it has a good attack stat and a pretty good speed stat. And like I feel like it's pretty good on any team, pretty much like up to and including the 7th gym. Like all of those gyms you can use Raticate and see some success with it. And then, you know, of course, even in, like I used Raticate in the Elite Four. Like it learns Shadow Ball, and it's a good Shadow Ball user. So yeah, I mean it's like it's really strong and it's really versatile, like surprisingly versatile, which is why I had it for high B. And I know I jacked the Raticate from you, Mike. Sorry, but like I just love this guy. What a great Pokemon.
Yeah, I mean I don't have a lot more to say. I think you hit on all key things. Like it's like a Pidgey, but it's better because it's common. You can't get it at various points of the game, and it just has, yeah, a good attack stat, has a better move pool. Yeah, just the fact that you can rely on Shadow Ball because of, you know, the lack of the physical special split. Like Eradicate can see use, you know, even in the late games. Like it's just a solid encounter. for the whole game.
Yeah, I'd put it top of B right now. Okay, next is Spearow and Fearow. I had them at middle B, like above Pidgey, maybe above Butterfree, but like still a B tier. And I mean, a lot of that is just from what I said before about like flying type in general in this game, while it's good, is like there's a harsh fall off point for flying's usefulness. Because like by the Elite Four and really by like the after Sabrina, there's not a lot that you're fighting where you're like, oh, I really needed a flying type there. If you have a psychic type, the psychic type is doing everything a flying type would have done for you. Outside of like maybe like there's no bug types that you're fighting at that point after Sabrina where you're like, oh, what do I do against this? Like I need a flying type. That never happens. So like Fearow gets hit by that as well, but the early game it's just better Pidgey. And it's actually a pretty good, one thing I wanted to mention is that like in the early game, like because it's the second stage and it doesn't have a third stage, it gets a little more bulky at that point too. And like, it's a good pivot. Like it's really good to pivot in the early game because it's also like, it's a Pokemon that you can see yourself sacrificing if you need to. So it works well as a pivot in that way too, where like if you don't want to risk something else, you can switch in your Fearow, do a lot of damage with Drill Peck, and then if you lose it, it's not the end of the world. And like I think all the way up until the Elite Four, like a Fearow can mesh well with any team. Like any team that you have can use a Fearow, but it's just that like you might get better options. So pretty middle of the road, I'd say.
Yeah, I think it's just a better version of the Pidgey line. It just serves the early game better, just because it has a better attack. And yeah, the fact that you can get the second Evo pretty early, like you get a little bit of that bulk, and it's just useful. It's just better than a Pidgeotto, and like a lot of like the key early game fights. Like you can use it against Misty, against some of like the rival fights. It's better for Erica. So it just does everything that the Pidgey line does, but better.
Fearow do what Pidgey don't.
Okay, so next we have the Arbok line, and personally I had this low. I had this in like a D tier, which would constitute like low C.
Yeah, this is where you and I were. This is our first big point of contention because I had Arbok in like a solid B, and like specifically this was me more looking at Arbok. Like I did include like Ekans in my idea, but like this is really just like once you get the Arbok, I had it like solidly B. But go ahead, Mike, convince me.
Well, I don't think I can. I feel like this is probably just more like my own bias. I haven't really used Arbok much, and I feel like whenever I have like, I just get like the Ekans and like I moan because it's just not that great.
Right. I mean, how often are you actually continuing into an Arbok?
Yeah, but like I think trying to look at it a bit more objectively, like I think there are some decent qualities to it. Like the Arbok can be pretty bulky. The poison type has its uses. It's not a great type, but there are uses to it, and it does have some support where stuff like Glare, Wrap, and Bind. Just the poison typing itself, like there's some utility there.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for me, I mean outside of the bulk, the two biggest things for me that has Arbok so high are that it's honestly like a really good pivot for any fight where you're not going against like a psychic ground type, like anything like that. Arbok is like great to pivot into, and I believe it usually has Intimidate, right? Maybe Shed Skin, which Shed Skin's not bad either if you're using it as a pivot, and if you have Intimidate, like that's so much better. So like great ability, pretty good moveset, like a lot of different stuff you can do with the moveset if you're using it as like a bulky pivot. Like I think that it's one of those things that like it's not great for every Nuzlocke run, but there are some times where like an Arbok is just going to be like super clutch. Like, I think it could be a really clutch member of the team. So as an encounter, I think it's like, yeah, sure, I'll hold on to this. I'll have this in my back pocket just in case. Which bumped it up to B. I'm not sure how, I had it like middle B. I definitely wouldn't put it above Fearow. I might put it above Pidgey though, but I'm kind of a Pidgey line hater at this point with Nuzlocks. Because like I've been fully converted to the Fearow church.
I mean, I could maybe see the argument for it being better than both the flying types. I feel like if it's better than Pidgey but worse than Fearow, that kind of doesn't make sense. It's just they're both similar.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's better than the flying types either. I'm probably gonna say no for now. I do think that it's a little more situationally useful than they are.
Yeah. Because
like poison in this generation doesn't get like a huge advantage on like doing great damage to things because there's no really like when you fight one Tangela in the game, everything else is grass poison, and like poison's not doing a ton else for you like super effective wise. So yeah, I'd say we put it at the bottom of B for now.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay, next up is Pikachu and Raichu. Personally, another B tier for me. And I had a few reasons for that. One is just that, like, in the early game, like, the Pikachu encounter is, like, super hype, right? Like, if you get the Pikachu in Viridian Forest, because it's, like, an early electric, like, a really early electric type, you can evolve it as soon as you get a stone. Like, it's gonna be pretty good, and it just, like, is helpful on Misty. Like, Misty is, like, the big thing, where it's, like, okay, I have, like, a great counter to Misty, especially if you had, like, the Charmander. So, like, it's good. Like, it's, like, really good, and then, like, Raichu's good throughout the game, especially with, like, its move pool of, like, Raichu getting, like, Brick Break is great, specifically. And, like, it has a few other things. And, I mean, you can double team with the Raichu. You can just do, like, a lot with the Raichu that, like, makes it a good Pokemon. But in the early game, you're not really using it that much outside of Misty. So, like, it's really just, like, a Misty Pokemon, and then you kind of bench it for a while as you wait to get to a point where it's useful again. And I do think that, like, just in terms of its encounter rarity, like, it's a little more common in the Power Plant, but it's so hard to get it in Viridian. And then it's only useful for, like, that one fight. And then the next time it's useful, you've had a chance to get a near guaranteed Voltorb. That's what bumped it down a little bit for me. Just the rarity of the encounter, and then the fact that I honestly think that it's generally outperformed by Voltorb. I think the Voltorb line is a little better, even if they can't learn Brick Break, just because of their incredible speed. And when you use them as a pure electric type, it can be a little bit better. So it's an interesting balancing act of, like, Raichu has a little bit of a better moveset. Its stats are pretty good, but it's kind of a hard encounter. So that bumped it down to B for me. But that's kind of where I was coming from with it.
Yeah, like, I had this line in A, because to me, I think, like, I agree that it's a little bit of a harder encounter. Like, yeah, it's not common in Viridian, and then you can only, like, get it in the Power Plant otherwise. But I just think, like, I think the typing plays a big role with this. Like, I think in Nuzlocke, especially, like, in this game, electric types are just so useful because, you know, it only has the one weakness to ground, and you're fighting a lot of, you know, water and flying types. So, like, electric is just, you know, a great type to have, especially, like, if you have, like, a Stab Thunderbolt. Like, it's just very useful. So, like, I think just the, you know, electric types alone are really good, so that's why I have a lot of them in the A tier, and I think, you know, this is no exception. Like, you know, in the early game, like, yeah, if you, I know it's rare, like, you're probably not gonna get it in Viridian, but, like, if you do, yeah, it could be useful for Misty. Like, you do fight a lot of, you know, flying trainers, you fight a lot of Zubats with Team Rocket, a lot of water types, so, like, I just think electric is just so valuable in a Nuzlocke. That's why I think it's the typing alone almost bumped it up to A to me, and also just the fact that, yeah, like, it's a decent Pokemon, it's fast, has a decent moveset, so, like, that's why I think it's a little bit higher than, like, a B tier encounter to me.
I guess, like, the one thing that I would agree with especially is, like, the electric type is good just because, like, there's so few grass types in this game. Like, having a second water killer is, like, really good. And yeah, I guess if we talk about, like, the ease of evolving it, like, the moment you get to Celadon, like, you're golden. But yeah, like, you get there and you just get the Raichu, so it's easy to get. So, like, I can be convinced, but I do think that it's the lowest. I do think it's, like, low. I still think it'll be lower than Electrode. I think it's outperformed a little bit within the types. I think that's part of what I was looking at, was, like, other electric types kind of influenced me. Because I think, like, I don't know, Pikachu's great, Raichu's got a good moveset, but it's, like, it's close. It's still close. It's, like, tough. Brick Break's great. So yeah, I could be convinced to put Raichu in A. I think it's a lower A, but I still think it can be up there.
Yeah, I know, we love Electrode in this
We
house,
do, we do love Electrode here, but
Raichu's pretty good too. So next we have the Sandshrew line. I had this as a C tier.
Yep. I don't think there's honestly, like, too much to say about Sandshrew outside of, like, it just doesn't do anything that another ground type doesn't do better. Specifically that Diglett doesn't do better. Like, Diglett does everything better than Sandshrew. And, like, Sandshrew falls off immediately after Surge, too. Like, the moment you beat Surge, it's like, maybe you'll use it against Koga for, like, the muck. I ended up using a Sandslash against Agatha once. It wasn't a great experience. It's kind of weak, and, like, you know, it's just, the only thing I can give it is that it's, like, easy to get it in Leaf Green. Like, it's a really easy encounter. So, like, it's common. But so is Diglett. So yeah, I think it's just like there's not really much that it's given you in this generation or in general compared to other ground types.
Yeah, like it's just, it doesn't have a great moveset.
Stats are yeah.
Yeah, it's just, its best advantage is like it's just another body against Surge.
Right.
Just get that ground immunity, but otherwise, yeah, they're just better ground types in the game.
It's definitely above Beedrill, but
yeah.
Okay, next up is the Nidos, and we're gonna do Nidoran female, Nidoran male together, just because they're functionally like they're really similar, and then we'll just kind of maybe talk about the differences slightly. But I had these at a strong A. I even could be convinced of S by the right person, but I think it's A. I think I have them like a very solid A. Because like for me, the one thing that was tough was just like, Poison Ground is great. The only thing was that late game, besides Earthquake, like a Nido has like a great moveset. So here's the thing. They're a really easy early evolution. You get the Moonstone super early. You have an incredibly strong Pokemon in the early game. You have an incredible, like just a solid stat spread. They're useful for the entire game. They have a great moveset, like a really versatile moveset. They can learn Surf, they can learn Earthquake, they can learn Thunderbolt. Like, the moveset potential is just great. I think the only thing that was like maybe pushing it out of S is just like, if you have other options to be running those like diverse movesets, like if you've got a Starmie and if you've got some other stuff, and you're not using the Nido for the diverse moveset, then they're a little less applicable to like endgame fights. Was the only thing where I was like, yeah, like you can use them, but you're probably not for that. And then if you're only using them for like Earthquake or even like a Dig, they're a little less useful at the end of the game, like assuming that you have other options. So I think that they are beat out by some other encounters later on, but like they're so good for the entire game that like no way they're ever below top of A, and like yeah, I could put them at bottom of S.
Yeah, like I had mine in low S, and I think yeah, just the biggest factor is how useful they are throughout the entire game. Like you said, you can get the third Evo like very early. So like, having such a powerful Pokemon early on is just such a plus. And yeah, their moveset is just so versatile. Like even in the early game, like just having a strong Dig and Brick Break user is very helpful. And I can kind of understand your point about in the late game, like especially like for the Elite Four, even like you probably have better Pokemon that are using like the stab moves, but I think even there, like the Nidos offer that kind of like all around potential. Like if if you're not sure like how to round out your team, like just having like a decently strong Pokemon like a Nido with a good moveset, like yeah, I'll put Earthquake, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Flamethrower on this thing, like that'll cover my bases.
Right, it of course like assumes, I guess it depends too on how many TMs are you getting for this thing. Like Dig will be easy, it'll always have Dig if you don't have Earthquake on it. But like, it could always have Brick Break, but like those other ones, it's a little situational, and like, I guess for me it's like, if I'm spending the money to buy an Ice Beam TM, I'm probably not putting it on the Nido. But that becomes less of an issue if you if you don't care about money. If you're like hacking in money or like anything like that, of course, it's a different story. But in a normal run, I do think that it's like, you don't want to invest it. Like if you're investing those resources, Nido's not the thing you're investing it in. But the fact that you can is still a really strong point in its favor. Like, since I would say we should put it in S just to be generous, and also like, I mean, it's good. They're so good.
I think we're both in agreement that Nidoking is better than Nidoking.
Yeah, I think Nidoking is a little better than Nidoking. Obviously, they're both really good, but just the strength of it. And I guess it depends on the type of Nido you're running. But in general, for like the early game digging Final Evolution Nido, like Nidoking is a little better.
Alright, so next we have the Clefairy line. And I had them in low C.
I also had them in low C.
Yeah, I don't think there's a lot to say with them. Like, they're a rare encounter. You can only get them in Mount Moon, and they're definitely better encounters to get in Mount Moon, like a Geodude or a Zubat even.
Yeah, it's a rare, moderately useful encounter, and like it's just kind of like, it's like Wigglytuff 2, but like worse, like a worse encounter to get than Jigglypuff. And like I feel like it can mesh well with some teams, just being like this like bulky-ish normal type with like an interesting move spread. Like if you have one, sure, like you can moonstone it and it can mesh on a team, but like when are you gonna have one, and like how long is it gonna stay on the team, you know? I guess if you like get it in the game corner, like that kind of helps the rarity, but at that point in the game, like you're really gonna spend your money on that? I don't know. I just don't think it gives you too much. It doesn't really do much.
There's something to be said about, you know, the normal types and their move pools, but I don't think, yeah, the Clefairy line has the stats to really back that up, especially, yeah, by even the mid game, like, it's only doing so much for you. So I think it's comfortably, like, C. Now, is it better than Sandshrew and Beedrill?
I don't know. Maybe? I guess, yeah. Stat-wise, I think it is, and, like, bulky normal type, nothing wrong with that. It's outperformed by other normal types, but, like, I think it's probably better than a Sandslash.
Yeah, I think just, like, the move pool alone, like, there's a bit more.
Okay, next we have Vulpix and Ninetales. This one is, like, I had them in C, to be honest with you, which I don't know if that's a hot take too, because fire is a good type, but I think it's just like it's like a very evidently like worse fire encounter than pretty much any other one in the game. And while it's easy to get, I mean, I guess I have to give it that, like you get it right before Erica and it's easy to get the encounter with it. Its moveset's kind of bad over like when you get Flamethrower. It takes a long time. Same with Growlithe, but you don't get the Arcanine out of it, you know? Like, you just get a Ninetales, and, like, Ninetales is not as good as Arcanine. So it's not bad for Erica and even, like, Koga. But, like, you don't really use it that much out of that, because, like, it's just the fire type. But it doesn't have the stats of a Growlithe, and it doesn't have the versatility of a Charizard, you know? Like, it's just kind of an okay fire type, which is not really as useful in this game as you'd think. Like, most of the fire types that are good here are offering something else, either, like, a good move pool, or, like, really strong stats, or both. So I'm not really sure how much you get out of a Vulpix long term. And even for the period of the game that it's good, that's a really short period. But like, for the area that it's caught in, it's a good encounter. Like, it's like, there's nothing else that you're going to catch there that's as good as a Vulpix. But I don't know. I just feel like it doesn't offer much throughout the game.
Yeah, like, I actually had Vulpix in, like, low A for me.
Okay, yeah, kind of a big difference.
You know, maybe I was overestimating it a bit. Like, I do agree that fire isn't as strong of a type in like this region. Like, it's good, but you know, there's only so many uses for it. But yeah, I just think the context of like when you get it, like yeah, you can get it for Erica, you can evolve it right away with the Firestone. I think unlike Growlithe, I think it learns Flamethrower earlier, so like you can use Flamethrower more, you can get more use out of it. And you know, it's just, to me, I just see it as like it's a pretty fast like Flamethrower user, which is pretty decent in like the mid game, because like, you know, you're doing on a lot of the trainers, like flame, you know, you're doing like neutral damage, like it could be useful against like things with low special defense. So like that's why I kind of had it that high, but I can see it, you know, being lower than that, because I do think it is, you know, worse than Charizard and Arcanine.
Yeah, so I had actually forgotten that it learns Flamethrower at level 29. Okay, that's enough to bump it up to B for me. That's a high B tier.
Yeah, I think B is fair. Like it's good.
Yeah, I mean the Stone Evo thing is like a huge point in its favor, and like I guess we have to keep in context too. Like if you're getting a Vulpix, like you didn't have Growlithe as an option anyway. So like comparing it to Growlithe is really like kind of, there's no point to that, because like you can't get both of them in the same game. So yeah, I was misguided. I'd bump it up. Definitely high B.
Yeah, if you don't have Charizard, it you know, it is your best fire type. So like, you know, it's useful. So where do we want to put it in B? High B?
Yeah, high B, maybe right below Raticate for me.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Like it might even be better than Raticate, but like you'll pry Raticate at top of B tier out of my cold dead hands.
Right. I mean, Raticate is the gatekeeper.
Right, Raticate is the gatekeeper. By the way, everyone, this is Andrew in Post, and I realized the reason I thought Vulpix learned Flamethrower so late is that in Generation 4, specifically Heart Gold and Soul Silver, Vulpix learns Extra Sensory at level 44. So a lot of times you'll have to grind the Vulpix up to get that move because it's so useful. And in my mind, I was replacing that grind to get Extra Sensory and assuming that that was the grind to get Flamethrower, which is why I initially placed Vulpix so low. So I just want to put out an apology to Vulpix. That one was on me. You're pretty cool.
Okay, so next up we have the Jigglypuff line. And I had these in low C.
I had them in low B, just because like, so it's like more common than a Clefairy, and like there's chances where like you do kind of buff up your chances to get it, depending on like if you got the Spearow before you get to Route, what is it, Route 3 or whatever that has the Jigglypuff.
Yeah, I think it's
Route 6. Okay,
yeah.
I don't really remember, but before you get to that route, yeah, 6 sounds more likely, but before you get there, if you like got the Spearow and like it kind of becomes a toss-up between the Nido and the Jigglypuff. And like Jigglypuff is a worse encounter than a Nido any day of the week. But like it's still good. Like you get the Moonstone, you can evolve it, you can teach it Mega Punch. I mean, it'll have a better moveset later on. It's decently bulky, it's decently adaptable to different moves, to different team compositions. But like, I don't know. Like, I think it's better than Clefairy, but just not by much, which is why I initially had it in low B.
Yeah, I mean, I just, viewed it as a little bit better than Clefairy, and I had them both in C.
So. Right, like for me, I guess like my original idea was kind of closer to what we have right here of just like Clefairy top of C, like Jigglypuff, Wigglytuff bottom of B. Like I think that just like, I don't know. Personally, I've never had a Clefairy, but I've had multiple Jigglypuffs. So like I think that's like influencing me of just like you get it more often, so it becomes a little more useful. Look, it's not bad for like, you know, the first couple of gyms, just like having like a mega punching bulky Wigglytuff is really good. And like since it's more likely to have it than a Clefairy, for me that's enough to bump it up a bit. But
yeah, like I would personally probably put it at top of C at this point. You know, I could see it in low B. Like I think it's, you know, right there from what we have.
Yeah, I think it's a toss-up, honestly, like either way. So
well, you know, I'll put it at a low B for now. I think, yeah, just that it's a little bit more common and maybe a little bit better in the early game than something like Clefairy.
Okay, so next up is Zubat and Golbat. This one was interesting for me because like I'm thinking like high B tier, but I had in my mind the possibility of a low A. Mostly just because of the typing. Like, it's a good flying type. Getting poison is nice. Getting bite is nice to get a dark move. Getting confused ray is great. So like its moveset is pretty good. It's easy to encounter, obviously. Very easy to find a Zubat. Like, it, you know, and especially like for this region, I think its moveset is good. It's just like, yeah, you can use bite, you can confuse people, get wing attack, later get fly. But like, I don't know. There's a big fall off on the end game. It's not so useful later on. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be dealing a lot of damage to it. So like maybe I like, as I'm looking at it now and with looking at what we have in A tier, I'm feeling more comfortable on B for Golbat.
Yeah, that's where I had it. I had it like mid B. Yeah, like it has a decent moveset, and you know, it's somewhat common in the caves. But I think, yeah, its biggest strength is probably its typing. Like, I think like Poison Flying has, you know, clear weaknesses, but it also has some useful resistances, I feel. You know, especially in these games. Like, I think, yeah, having the Golbat as like a pivot or kind of tanky option is pretty good. And yeah, it just has some utility with, you know, moves like Confuse Ray and like Poison, even, yeah, Bite with flinching. So like, it's just it's a solid Pokemon. I don't think it's, you know, that great, but it's good.
Does it surpass the Gatekeeper Raticate? I don't think so.
I don't think so. I'd
maybe put it above Butterfree, personally. I think it, God, it might not be. That's like, it's hard because Butterfree just has Sleep Powder.
Yeah, Butterfree has so much utility and Psychic.
And it just gets Psychic. Maybe we put it just right below Butterfree. I think Golbat's better. Like, if you have a Golbat, like, with Wing Attack, it's probably better than a Fearow. Although, I've never personally used a Golbat over a Fearow, but I think it's probably a little better for, like, an actual team build.
Alright, so next we have the Oddish line. And I had them in B.
I also had them in B, but I think a pretty high B, personally.
Yeah, I would agree.
This is your like second best poison grass type in the game for sure. Like, I'd say this is pretty easily better than Victory Bell just because it's got a better move set and it uses Gen 3's grass and poison type better than Victory Bell does. So like, you know, it's good for Misty, you can catch it before Misty. It's a good defensive pivot after that. Vileplume is just good. I think you mentioned before Monkey gets Petal Dance. I believe. Like,
Yeah.
just a lot of options. Like, it's good. It's a good type. It's a decent Pokemon. And I think it's just like a little better than Victory Bell. So like, it's nothing outstanding. But if you don't have a Bulbasaur, then like for sure, you can use this.
Yeah, I think similar to like if you don't have, the Charmander line, like, a Vulpix or a Growlithe is your best fire type. I think, yeah, if you don't have the Bulbasaur line, a Vileplume or a Victory Bell are your best grass options. And Vileplume's a little bit better than Victory Bell is, a little bit better move pool and stats. So I think, yeah, it's a B tier encounter. I think it's good. It has some good bulk, good utility, but nothing crazy.
Where do we place it though?
Maybe like high.
We said Raticate was the gatekeeper, but like Butterfree is really the gatekeeper within the B tier. I keep coming back and being like, is this thing better than Butterfree?
I mean, it has the utility that Butterfree
I think
has.
Vileplume. I think Vileplume might be better than Butterfree. Petal Dance, like getting like the powders. If you,
I feel like Stab Giga Drain.
Right, a Stab Giga Drain, like
is better than non-stab Sight.
Yeah, so I think that this is probably gonna, like, I'd put this above Butterfree.
Is it above Vulpix and Raticate?
I don't think it's above Raticate personally.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. Like, it is really good. Is it better than Vulpix? It's definitely like, it's pretty comparable to Vulpix. I could honestly put it above or below.
Yeah, I think I would put it above just because of the utility.
Yeah, that's fair.
I think you're getting a little bit more out of a Vileplume overall than a Vulpix. But...
Okay, next up is Parasect. This one I'll say right off the bat, interesting Pokemon, interesting type combination, still a C tier to me. That just nothing that it really does for you. Like, yeah, it's cool to have like the bug, but you don't really need bug that often. And everything that it can do, it's done better by somebody else. And like, honestly, like most people are probably never encountering a Paras to begin with. I guess maybe you get the like Safari Zone Paras, like, but at that point, I really doubt that this is your grass type or that you really need one. So yeah, I think C tier. I'd probably put it below Sandslash personally just because you use it less. Honestly, maybe even below Beedrill, I'm not sure. Like, you'd use a Beedrill on Misty. Would you use a Paras on Misty? I guess. But if you don't have anything else, I guess you could use a Paras on Misty. Like, I've never encountered that situation. So it's hard for me to say, like, maybe, is it better than Beedrill? I would probably put it below Beedrill. All I'll say is that I've seen, just because, like, if you get a Beedrill, chances are you end up maybe using it a bit. If you get a Paras, you might not. I don't know. Like, feels more situational. All I know is that I've seen multiple people use a Beedrill, and I've never seen anyone use a Paras. That might just be, like, that's anecdotal, so, like, that obviously shouldn't necessarily impact the placement on the list, but Beedrill's probably faster, too.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, Paras, like, its weakness is the fact that like, its typing isn't amazing, but it's very slow. It's like, yeah, I mean, there's just not a lot you're getting out from it, so yeah, I think it's fair to put it below Beedrill even. I think Beedrill, you have a more likely chance of using it sporadically throughout the run.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we have the Venonat line, and I had this in like a high B.
Interestingly, I'm surprised, Mike. I had it low A. Yeah, now that might just be like it. This is with the stipulation that it would be like bottom of A. But I just think Venomoth is really good.
Yeah, I think it. Like I was surprised at how good a Venomoth could be in a Fire and Leaf Green run. This is like, it's bug poison, so like it's not an amazing type, but it just has a lot going for it. Like it has, it has the status moves with Sleep Powder, Poison Powder. It can get Compound Eyes, and like it gets Psychic moves. Like it can learn Psybeam. You could teach it Psychic. It's like if you don't have a Psychic type, like Venomoth is your next best thing. And like it could be useful against like, especially like against like Koga, like using a poison type with Psychic, like it's can kind of minimize the threat of him. So yeah, it's a very useful encounter where like it provides something where if you might not have a good psychic type like Venomoth can kind of fill that role, and it just has the added, utility with like sleep powder.
Right, I also think like it's pretty easy to encounter it, like outside of Fuchsia. Like it's not an incredibly rare encounter. So yeah, like it's not super hard to find it. It's got decent stats, it's got a great moveset. I mean, it is really fragile, like that's a big difficulty that you encounter with it. But the fact that it can kind of be like a utility Pokemon and like a good like versatile Pokemon, I guess is why I was valuing it so highly. Like, honestly, I think that this might be the thing to dethrone Raticate at the top of B tier. Like, Sleep Powder is really strong, and then getting, like, a good Psychic user, like, having the Bug type to actually, like, do some stuff against Psychic.
Yeah, like, I don't know if it's A, it would be low A, but I think, like, top of B is...
Yeah, I'm fine with top of B. Like, I'm not married to the idea of Venomoth in A. Okay, next up is Diglett and Dugtrio. This one's an easy A for me. It's easy A tier.
Same.
I think it's for obvious reasons, like the fact that you just get one in Diglett Cave. Like outside of insane bad luck, you just get one for free. It's incredibly fast. It has immediate use against Surge, and then it has use throughout a ton of the game, even up to like the final, like Blaine. And even in the Elite Four, you can use a Dugtrio. Really strong, has Earthquake, really fast, really easy to get. Probably the best ground type in this game. That's not a Nidoking. It's just like an easy A for me. I'd put it like probably maybe above Pikachu personally, but I mean it's it's in there in A.
Yeah, I also had it in A. I think the same thing. It's immediately useful, and it's just a fast Earthquake user. So I think it's clearly an A.
Do you think it's above Pikachu?
Like I ranked it above Pikachu?
Yeah, because I think it's above Pikachu.
Alright, so next up is the Meowth line. And I had them in B, like high B.
I had them in low A. And that's actually, like, I'm still kind of feeling that as I consider this line. Let me tell you why. Specifically, there's like two things. It's the same as Diglett. It's like a guaranteed encounter. You probably had a Pidgey by the time that you're on the route south of Cerulean, and like you just get a Meowth. And then it's got incredible versatility. Just like great versatility. Like the fact that it can learn like electric moves, and then it can learn Dig, and it can have like strong normal moves. It's got a good attack stat. It's decently fast. Look, its stats are good. You get it really easily. It can slot into pretty much any team at any point in the game and have a place on that team. So yeah, I think that Persian is just like really solid, and like Meowth is honestly not bad. Also, the pickup ability is just nice. That's just a little added bonus.
Yeah, I think, I was viewing them, like, I think the Meowth line and the Rattata line are very similar. So like, that's why I had them kind of similarly ranked. I do see the argument of them being low A, because they are, I think unlike Raticate, they have an even better move pool.
Right, I think their versatility is just a little higher.
Yeah, like, they can also run the Shadow Ball strat, but, having Thunderbolt, you can teach like Water Pulse, they learn like Feint attacks, like, it provides a lot. And yeah, it has decent stats, so I can agree with the placement, like low A.
Yeah, I'd probably put it at the bottom of our current A tier. Okay, so next is Psyduck and Golduck. And this is one where, like, if this were any other game, I'd be valuing them more highly, but Golduck doesn't get Zen Headbutt yet. So, like, this is just, like, strong C. Like, top of C tier for me.
I actually had it, like, mid-B. But...
I think that we're seeing a trend here, Mike, where you're valuing, like, the type, especially with the water types, more than I am.
Yeah.
Of like, water type's great. I mean, yeah, it's a water type. It'll use Surf. I think it does get like Confusion, right? So in Generation 3, Golduck learns Confusion at level 16, and that's the only psychic move that it gets. And like, that's not bad. But that's not bad. So like, I don't know. Maybe that could bump it up a bit for me, because like having like Surf, Confusion at 50 power, and then whatever else you want to get on your Golduck, it's not bad. But I do think there are better water types in the game. I mean, he is like an easy encounter. Like, you can get a Psyduck pretty easily. I just think that there's almost never a reason to have a Golduck on your team. So yeah, if it has confusion, like, that's a little better. Like, I could see lower B tier in that point, because like Psychic is just good and like Golduck's good. But I guess I was just viewing it from the perspective of like, there's really not often going to be a reason to use it when you got another water type on your team. But it's easy to encounter. It's pretty strong. It does get a lot stronger in later generations, but like it's decent. So if you were thinking low B, I might be able to go along with that.
Yeah, like I think it's low B. I think, you know, the water types are so valuable. And I think Golduck is an okay water type. Like, it has okay stats. So, you know, it can utilize Surf, Confusion. You know, you can even give it an Ice Beam if you need it. So, I think, you know, its typing alone kind of carries it, so I'd say somewhere in B. Where exactly? I'm not entirely sure.
Right, I mean, Surf alone could easily place it, like, above Golbat if we wanted it to, but
yeah.
Do we want to value just like the water type that highly, or kind of look at it? Like, I think that is one thing we should keep in mind. Like, even though, like, yeah, water is great, like, just any water type could be placed immediately above a lot of the B tier. But I think we should almost like counterbalance it a little bit and be like, yeah, it's a water type, and maybe we should also view it among the other water types and like balance our placement a little bit based on that. Because I don't want to just have, like, it's a water type being, like, so you're better than... Because, like, usually you're only going to have one water type on the team. You know what I mean? So, like, I don't want to say, like, yeah, you're a water type, so you're higher than Golbat. But, like, the difference between those two things is that you get a Golduck, you might have a different water type you're using. You get a Golbat, you don't have a different poison flying type. So, like, I don't know.
Yeah, so where do we place it?
Above Arbok, maybe? Or above Jigglypuff? Is what I'm thinking.
Okay, so next we have the Mankey line, and I had them in B.
I also had them in B.
Yeah, like, you know, they're solid.
It's really good in the early, like, really good for Brock.
Yeah.
So like, that definitely helps. Like, it's super good for Brock, and it's okay for the rest of the early game. I think that the thing about Mankey and Primeape is that they're like alternatingly useful and useless. Like, there are times where, like, yeah, this Primeape rocks, and then there are times where it's like, I cannot use you. And, like, there is a decent fall off toward the later game.
Yeah, like, the fighting type is an interesting type in these games, because, like, it's useful. Because, like, there are a lot of, especially in the early game, there's a lot of rock and normal types, so, like, you're definitely getting use out of it. But then by the later game, like, you know, you don't necessarily need a fighting type as much. Like, you know, Mankey and Primeape are good. Like, they're offering, you know, some value for, like, a good chunk of the game. So, like, I think there's, you know, definitely, like, a B tier. Like, they're pretty good. They're not incredible, but they definitely offer a good amount of value.
Right. I personally would probably put them... They can learn Thunderbolt if you really need them to. I'd probably put them above Golbat, under Butterfree, personally.
Yeah, that's about where I would do, like, almost like the middle exactly.
Right. Alright, so that's the first 24 lines done, and with that we're actually going to cut it here. We're going to separate this into thirds, mostly just to keep everything a little more under control as we go through all this, so it's not just one huge gargantuan tier list video. That this will be easier for us and probably easier for you as well. With that, next time we're going to pick it up with Growlithe and Arcanine. We're going to go through the next kind of like the second third of the encounters in Fire Red and Leaf Green and continue with the ranking. But with all that said, I hope that you enjoyed hearing us talk about our thoughts on the encounters. As always, if you have any differing opinions, or if you think that we're wrong, or if you want to flame me for my original Vulpix placement, you could do that down in the comments. And since we will be putting out a part 2 and likely a part 3 for this, we'd appreciate it if you could subscribe to keep up to date with that, and obviously see everything else we do. We don't just talk about Fire Red and Leaf Green runs, we actually do them too. So if you want to check those out, we'd really appreciate it. With all that said, I hope you have a great day, and stay phenomenal.